empowerment initiative, Up the Vote 901. And our mission and vision is to help to produce more power, information, and representation for more people and to um, increase voter turnout in every election. So again, thank y'all. This, for those of you who do know me, you should know I know somebody else is okay, so Kim, you got to stop sharing so I can share, but I do have sharing capacity right now.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Um, for those of you who do know me, you would probably know that and can everybody see this? I can't see y'all right now the way this is set up, so maybe I need to adjust my screen sharing. But if somebody could say audibly, if y'all could see this.
Yes, Dr. Fisher, we can see it.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you. So y'all can see it and I can't. So let me adjust some of my share settings for a second. Mm. Can y'all still see it?
If you're sharing something, I can't see it. All that I have in front of me is a gallery of people in the breakout room.
Yep. So let me try this again. I think I'll get it done in just a second. I think this should work. What about now? Everybody good now?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, sir. That's good.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. So now I can do a little bit of this. So for those of you who I don't know, and everybody get a chance to kind of like introduce yourself, I'm gonna ask as you make your remarks or your questions that you would tell me then, you know, name, your context of ministry, so on and so forth. But for those of you who do know me, y'all know we got I think 75 minutes allotted. And there's no way I'm about to sit up here and lecture or present for 75 minutes. So I want this to be an interactive workshop. I'm going to present some ideas and some perspectives based upon some experiences and some expertise. And at any moment in the midst of this, you can, stop, raise your hand, ask for clarification, share some perspective, because I want it to be more of a dialogue than a monologue. So, again, thank y'all for this. I have themed this conversation from public statements to public strategy, sermonic militancy as a model for public discipleship. I understand that some of us on here may not be pastors. I do believe everybody on here is a faith leader or connected to some faith-based institution. If I'm wrong, somebody let me know now. So there anybody who doesn't fit that description? Because I would want to try to maneuver in a way that is as inclusive as possible as we think about the moment that we're in and what is called of us ministerially. So I want to start with the moment that we're in and the moment that we're facing. Matter of fact, before I do this, I want to do this. How many of us, I'm gonna stop my sharing for a second. How many of us have attended or witnessed um, one of the recent um, clergy, faith-based, denominational conventions or gatherings? So you know there's a lot of them. This Hampton took place a couple weeks ago. Um, I think E.K. Bailey may have taken place, or IC3 take place. Those are preacher conferences. Um, the Progressive National Baptist Convention, I think their delegation, the Southern delegation, met a couple weeks ago. The National Baptist Convention met a couple weeks ago. Full Gospel Baptist National Convention was in Florida a couple of days ago. Who else? Am I missing anybody? The Church of God in Christ, the AIM convention, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, cool. Some of y'all attended some of these, right? Can somebody tell me, in light of, yep, the CME church just met, right? All of these denominational gatherings. And this is the moment that I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen. This is the moment as I understand it. I'm not saying that this is the totality of the moment, But this is definitely part and parcel of the moment that we're in right now. Attacks on voting rights, attacks on public education, and historical memory. And I believe that they demand much more than symbolic responses. Out of all of those gatherings, can anybody tell me now listen, y'all might think I'm throwing shade. I'm not. If I'm throwing shade, I'm gonna say I'm throwing shade. This is a genuine question. Matter of fact, I wish if you can y'all cut your cameras on so we can have this conversation, please? But if not, I get it if you can't. I know it's 9 o'clock in the morning and my Holy Ghost don't wake up till 10. So that's the moment. Can anybody tell me what any of those gatherings provided for us, for you individually, for us collectively, to respond to the political crisis of the moment?
In the southern region, we did a breakout with some people, and we've established, we already have a social justice forum, but we also now have included voter registration within it.
Got it.
Because like the man said, it doesn't matter. You're going to be voting just about every year. You got a 2-year election, 3-year election, 4 years. So you're going to be voting just about all your life. So he says, so don't think that your vote is not important, because it is, because one leads to the other. So that's what I was.
So one, I want to make sure I address you properly. Is it Pastor Fields? Is it Reverend Fields? Is it Dr. Fields? Is it Sister Kathy?
No. Sister Kathy.
Okay, Sister Kathy. Stay unmuted for a second, because you're helping me get some perspective here. I told y'all this was a genuine question, and we workshopping this stuff together. Okay. So Sister Kathy, if I heard you correctly, you said the social justice wing of the Progressive National Baptist Church gathered during the convention and said, hey, amongst yourself, you gathered and said, hey, everybody, let's work on voter registration.
Yes.
Okay. So do you know if that plan, policy, that proposal was made public? Did they publish anything like, we encourage all churches connected to PMBC to do this, start voter registration this day, this place, or use this tool, or any of that? Was any of that there?
Yes, and they even designated a Sunday that they wanted all the churches to come together and highlight that. So the first Sunday in this month, in fact, July, was the theme that, and something went out. Not only did it go out on, while we was at the convention, but on their Facebook pages, all their media platforms, that information was shared. But it was shared between, all the churches there.
Okay. All right. And somebody in the chat, I hope this, all these organizations have a social justice department. Dr. Solomon Cochran says of sorts. And then the question comes to effectiveness and intentionality. I agree. Reverend, I want to pronounce your name properly. So can you help me pronounce it properly? Elora?
That's correct. Good morning.
Good morning.
That's correct.
So Reverend Elora says new mandates were made to be included in the discipline. Okay. All right. This is helpful. Thank y'all. Let me say this. I spoke to, I'm not going to give the person's name, and I'm not even going to give the particulars of a description, because I want to honor their anonymity, because this was a conversation I had with this person. I had a conversation with someone running for an office in PMBC. And I asked the same question. They did not give me the answer you just gave, Sister Kathy. Because what I said was, I haven't seen publicly anything more than a statement where the National Baptist Convention has made a statement about the political landscape. I'm sure PMBC is speaking to the issue. I want to be very clear about that. I get plenty of respect for that. Speaking to the issue, right? And so I think I'm pretty clear. Pastor Josh, is that a hand up? Did you have your hand up? Or you just had, okay, good. I want to do the best that I can to try to set the frame of the ideas I want to share. Because many denominations have issued some statements about what's happening. Few have committed to strategy, the implementation, the documentation, the explication of a strategy that the faith communities and the faith leaders can engage in, execute, and in some ways concretely measure so that we can assess the effectiveness of what we're trying to enact in this moment. And what I want to ask us to think about and consider and work through is how to get the Black church in particular, but the Black faith community more broadly, to move from reactive commentary to proactive organization. Because I'm clear we have something to say, and we'll discuss whether or not what we are saying is helpful or harmful, or maybe a mixture of both. But what I am concerned about is whether or not we have the necessary strategy to build the power that is needed to be built. If you are assessing the moment that we are in, you know, as it relates to political power, we are losing valuable ground that had been gained over decades. And at the current moment, if everything stopped fully right now, we would have to spend several years, if not several decades, trying to reclaim what we've lost in the last few years. And this is while our denominational bodies, our conventions, our what we call our clergy networks. I mean, we gather and doing a whole bunch of stuff. And if I want to say spending a whole bunch of money too, and I am not mad at that. I think we should. I think pastors and preachers and faith leaders and scholars should look. I go to the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference every year, as long as I can. I'm down for that, right? And when I go, there's certain things that I expect. I expect to get some information. I expect to get some inspiration. I expect to get reconnected with some of the people who I hadn't seen in a long time. And I expect for there to be some communal, collective marching orders. And that's not always the case. So I'm talking about the crucial moment that we're in right now and what I believe we, since we're in this space right now, can think through, talk through, dialogue about, and try to figure out. Because I just don't see. Think about what I listed all of these different gatherings. Sister Kathy mentioned PMBC doing something. Before I move any further, did we miss anybody else? I mentioned the National Baptist Convention. I think the General President Boyce Kimber, I think is his name, issued a statement. And again, I talk to people. If y'all know me, y'all know I know people in these spaces. And so before I present, I already had conversations. I have people tell me call a Zoom because I'm like, yo, what should we do in this moment? Like, other than make a statement saying we stand against this. What should we do other than say, and this is helpful. I'm not saying we shouldn't say this. What should we say other than everybody get your people registered to vote? Because I'll tell y'all as we move further in this, I discovered many years ago, we typically in Black communities do not have a voter registration problem. We have a voter education problem, a voter engagement problem, and a voter empowerment problem that leads to a voter turnout problem. And I know what we typically do in Black faith communities. We say, get your people registered. And we need to. And typically the buck stops there. So I'm asking again for dexterity's sake. Somebody let me know if I have missed anything. Yep. And again, y'all do me this favor. And I know y'all are faith leaders that love to be modest, but I want to put some respect on your name. So rename yourself and put any title that I need to address in your. So for instance, somebody I know for sure, Reverend Josh Harper, okay? Or you can say Dean Josh Harper. You've been Dean of Chapel before, right? Thank you, Reverend Dr. Milo Lumpkin. Daryl Harrington should be Reverend Dr. Daryl Harrington. Thank you, Dr. Annette Matlock. There you go. There you go. Help me here. Help me here.
Can I make a comment on your last statement? Okay.
Yes, please.
So attending, the community meetings that have the mayor or the comptroller, and we've talked about voter registration. Well, there was a young man there. He was brave enough to stand up because you could hear his voice shaking a little bit. But he says, I've registered to vote. Now, what am I supposed to do? What are my friends and I? What are we supposed to do now? We're registered. So the education piece, there people are hungry for it. They want to know what to do next.
Yeah. And those people, Dr. Matlock, are people in our personal network, our pastoral network, if we pastor, our professional network, our ministerial and congregational network. And so if we're going to have a adequate conversation and dialogue and workshop on voting and public policy and public messaging, we have to be honest about what the landscape is and what the landscape is lacking from us. So I want to do a little bit more painting of the picture of the moment that we're facing, and then try to shift a little bit into where I think we can go collectively and communally to better respond to the moment that we're in. So again, you got denominations, and listen, when I say you have tens of thousands of faith leaders gathering over the last several months, all the country, in a moment when racist redistricting is happening in Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, or at least attempted to be happening. Attempted all over the South. You have attacks on just about every public institution that has any commitment to what conventionally might be called diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I'm going to say more explicitly, any commitment to helping Black folks in any substantial way. And the best thing we seem to be able to do right now is gather people together and teach them how to preach a little bit better. Or it's folks running for all kind of denominational offices. And people seem to be turning out to do that. And I would hope that we can think through how to move our congregations, our communities, our networks from reactive commentary. Because if you scroll through your social media timeline, I guarantee you will not need to scroll far before you find all manner of ill-informed, misinformed, uninformed, and some informed reactive commentary. But what you rarely find, and what we need to cultivate more of, and I hope we in this space can be committed to cultivating over the next several weeks at the very least, is some proactive organization. Because I know we have something to say. And we can talk about how we say what we say and where we say it. But I want us to make sure that how we're saying, what we're saying, where we're saying it, who we're saying it to, is grounded in the why of building political power. So, I want to talk a little bit about how to move from public statements to public strategy. Don't forget, now at any time, y'all can stop me, ask some questions and stuff like this. It's just a conversation and a dialogue. So I think most of us are caught up in the web of social media spectacle and commentary, where you can get a lot of traction by simply naming a problem. How many times have y'all heard somebody start there? Matter of fact, somebody probably gonna do this today before this 55 minutes is up. Somebody gonna say the problem is, right? They're gonna name the problem. I mean, we are good. Right? Some of us are good at naming the problem. Some of us name the fruit of a problem, but not the root of a problem. And if you ever are going to be revolutionary, it simply means to get to the root of something. But you can find people naming the problem. And I think you're going to hear me talk some about sermonic militancy in a second. And I'm referencing an article that I published in 2021 that tried to delineate between people being socially just or socially conscious. And what we have in our current landscape, from movement leaders, ministerial leaders, so on and so forth, are people who are socially conscious, which is to say they know something about what's happening in the society and they speak on that. And then the next step will not just be to display that you know something about it, but that you can articulate what's wrong. So they name the problem, and that's typically it. And so you can hear people in some of their public commentary, and if you get a chance to speak on a particular issue, people will say something like, police are killing black folk. That's true, right? Then they'll say, Ahmaud Arbery, which really didn't get killed by police, but Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, who really didn't get killed by a police officer, but Mike Brown. In Memphis, they would say Darius Stewart, and I would say Tyrone Johnson, right? The list goes on, Tyree Nichols, right? And they'll name all of these things in ways that articulate a certain social consciousness. But that still doesn't make it socially just. Naming a problem is not the totality of what is called forth to build power. Now, you can stir up emotion by naming a problem, but that doesn't mean that you have offered what Walter Brueggemann will call in the prophetic imagination an alternative vision of existence. So if all we are, we'll name the problem. But our move needs to be not just the statement, but the strategy that builds the solution. And where you very rarely, if ever, find our people centering themselves is, here's the problem, here's what we need to do, here are the steps we need to take in order to absolve the problem. And I think that's the heavy lift that a lot of us don't want to take. This is the this is what the writer calls the long obedience in the same direction. Because strategy requires some clarity, some coordination, and some courage. It requires clarity because if you don't have a clear understanding of a situation, a circumstance, a system, and a structure, all you're going to do is run people in circles. And that is going to inevitably cause apathy. If you want to know why so many of our people are apathetic right now, it's because we have riled our people up emotionally, but we have been unclear on the situation, the circumstance, the system, and the structure. So we misdirect them. I'll give you an example. So let's just say, I'm gonna put this into a hypothetical, even though it's technically something that kind of happened recently. Let's just say there's an issue, and then people are upset about the issue. So people say they want to demonstrate, they want to protest, right? But they don't understand that the way that the problem is constructed, the function of the protest is to raise the consciousness of the public around the issue. And then hopefully after you have raised their conscience and gotten more people aware of what's happening, people are going to say, well, what can we do about it? Which is to say the protest and the demonstration is necessary, but it is never the end game. The end game is the change. And if we're talking about a social and political reality, the change is public policy, some kind of communal agreement on how we will behave differently and hopefully better. If you don't provide that, people are going to get riled up, they're going to move, but nothing's going to change. And then they're going to say, well, I voted, but it don't matter. So you need the clarity so that they have a deeper understanding of one thing among other things, but a timeline. How long is it going to take us? It might take us 3 years. It might take us. Now, this is where we miss it. This is where we're losing. I've been saying this to NAACP and some others. I said this at a town hall meeting with the NAACP a couple of weeks ago, right after the redistricting stuff happened. I said, Project 2025 is 900 pages and a 50-year plan. But the only time we seem to come together is a couple weeks before the election starts. We have to have a long-term plan. But it's hard to sell people on the long-term plan because we got microwave appetite for a crock pot problem. So we want a microwave solution to the crock pot problem. So you need clarity, you need coordination, because you cannot do this in isolation. This is why I'm saying the denominational bodies are gathering. And I don't see, now help me y'all if I'm missing this, I don't see the coordination on the implementation of a strategy that can help us move beyond just naming the problem. And it also is going to take some courage, because one of the cuss words in our current culture is sacrifice. People think they should get everything and not have to sacrifice anything. So I want to try to get us to think about how to move from speaking the truth to doing the work together. And I appreciate the power and the potential of prophetic preaching. I try to produce some of that myself. And I also, hear me, y'all, know the limitations of prophetic preaching when it comes to building political power. Because prophetic preaching is not the end game. It's really the warm-up. It's the pregame. I went and did some research several years ago, and if you ever go back and listen to what Dr. Gina Stewart preached at Dr. Frank Thomas's retirement celebration a couple of months ago, she opened telling the story about when James Bevel preached a sermon that caused Fannie Lou Hamer to be inspired to get registered to vote. And she's citing research I did. She said it, Dr. Earle Fisher, the son of ministers, right? And so I'm saying this to say, we know about Fannie Lou Hamer and the work that she did, especially around voting rights and voting engagement. And I'm assuming that we know, we might not know. Fannie Lou Hamer did work in voting rights. The Freedom Democratic Party would have been equivalent to what we understand the Tea Party to be on the right for the Democratic Party in the 60s. And we know about that work because that work was the game. The pregame was James Bevel preaching. We've inverted this thing. We think now the preaching is the end game. So the purpose of the preaching is to get to people. The purpose of the preaching in this context is public messaging, okay? Public proclamation. The purpose of the preaching should be to inspire and inform people into prophetic action. What we think the prophetic action is now is give the preacher your hand, give God your heart. Come on down the aisle. Confess with your mouth, believe in your heart that Jesus died and rose on the third day, and you shall be saved. And if you think I'm lying, go back and listen to all of the convention messages. Listen to all of them and tell me where you see a functional statement, especially at a late night service, because these are the pinnacle of the preacher moments. And hey, if I get invited to preach one, I'm going to preach it, and I'm going to try to preach my face off, and you're going to hear me say, my primary preaching assignment is this, and this thing is going to be an action statement trying to get us as a congregation and a community to do something. So the public messaging cannot just stop at naming the problem. It has to cultivate a strategy, because the end game is not the proclamation. The end game is participation in the public and communal action. Okay, I said a lot. I'm gonna back up a little bit. I got a couple more, but we got, I think, about 45 minutes left. So I'm talking enough. Y'all talk to me some. What y'all hear me saying? What y'all thinking? Y'all won't, I'm not finna take my time and read y'all's comments that you can open up your mouth and say and have your voice. Go ahead, Dr. Lumpkin. Unmute yourself, brother.
Yes, Dr. Fisher. I was just trying to take it all in, and I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the things that our strategy informs us to do, and I like what you said about we're good at naming the problem, right? So we can take that off the list. But I'm a avid believer through my professor, Dr. Harold Trulier, talked about assessing a value system before we note the problem. That helps us ground ourselves and center ourselves for a strategy that you're talking about, and not just jump into the problem. And it sets us up for a formula of how we organize, we strategize, and we mobilize. And so one of the things you said, clarity, putting a timeline together, long-term plan, that's theological. Mission work has been known and proven that short-term mission is ineffective. Juxtapose long-term mission. And that takes what? Relationship building. And so if we are to do this, we have to get out of our spiritual prejudice as denominations and cross those lines. I'm a part of the United Methodist Church, which is very European, to be honest with you.
The black ones are too.
Yeah. And most of those congregations aren't willing to accept the pushback on the power system because they are part of the problem. Me as a black clergy member, I serve 2 all-white congregations in Fayette County, which is tough. But I've taken the assignment, and what I found is education. That education piece that you said, Christian education. Education is the key, is the foundation for informing our strategy. Nothing is done in our communities, in our state, and in our federal government without policy.
Right. Well, nothing is legally done without it.
Right. Yeah. But see, the trick is if you're uneducated, then it'll go right past you.
Yeah.
Right. So you definitely, I like how you put it in tiers, because there are some multiple correlations that we have to put together to get to our strategy. It's not just one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I like that strategy. And what's tough for me is we just had our annual conference in Nashville, by the way, in Murfreesboro. And there was a quick,
drive by. We love to drive by.
The drive by, Christian nationalism, But the problem is most of the people that look like me, or whether they are female or whether they're male in our denomination, because both are allowed to serve as clergy, the unwillingness to stand, because they have to go back to those congregations and if we're honest and open in those conversations, said that there's a lot of pressure on the clergy to not be in alignment with the community. So there lies a problem. But you have to have some people, like you said, courageous, like myself. The DS has told me, and I'm not going to say who the DS's name is, I'm going to keep that confidential. But you can't go in there and preach those sermons, those prophetic sermons to them because you're the only person of color in that congregation. And you're going to, it's not going to work out well for you. But my response was totally different. I said, well, hey, Jesus, Paul, and many other people in that Bible walked into some certain situations and it was very uncomfortable. So I just take my stripes.
Yeah, I should have asked too. So what is the end game of a non-prophetic sermon? Right. I mean, and so I mean, and two, I want to say a couple of things right quick. So thanks, Dr. Lumpkin. One, I want to say, no matter what I say today, I'm not telling y'all to go to your denominational body and flip them off and tell them that they trash and they don't do nothing and yada yada. And Dr. said, y'all, please don't do that. I'm not doing that. Number two, what I am presenting and describing is based upon several years of political, theological research and engagement. And I'm inviting us into that same journey. And that's why I appreciate you talking about the relationship building piece. And I'll say a little bit more about how to do some of that in this moment in some ways that I think are helpful. But again, because we are in a culture obsessed with celebrity, but here's what most of us want: for somebody else to do the legwork, for somebody else to curate the audience, for somebody else to do the sweat equity, create the platform and the stage for us. We come, present, and then get celebrated for the presentation, get our check, and go home. And that's most of our approach to public ministry. When what makes this most effective from a power building standpoint is the relationships that you are able to establish. I'm going to go out on a limb and say a whole lot of people on this call right now, on this call or in this room, because we have personal relationship. And they know I'm not blowing smoke. And the rest of y'all are probably in here because you heard somebody else say, oh yeah, you should, somebody else, you got a relationship with somebody, they said something. This is how this stuff is going to work. So I'll come back to that, a little bit more in a second. But yeah, I reasonably understand, not fully because I'm not in a connectional denomination, but I reasonably understand the challenges of dealing with institutions. And I know, and some of the folks, in here can testify because I've told them that it takes time to build the kind of credibility to move institutions the way we envision them moving. And so you end up in a moment like this, and you think the answer is the catchphrase or the neatly crafted statement. And I'm saying, no, it's the long-term strategy. Come on, Dr. Matlock, I want you to say what you just put in the chat. I saw something, but I just want you to say it.
I have found that in some religious institutions, and I'm saying some, Blackness, the Black identity, and the Black experience are supposed to be set aside and put aside because we should only have our identity in Christ. And I'll just say, is it a Black woman's Jesus or a white woman's Christ?
White woman's Christ.
So just thinking about that, and so that when you're even in Black churches, not just predominantly white churches, you're supposed to do that because we're all in Christ. So why do we have to do all this Black stuff all the time? And I was like, okay, I can't be here. So yeah, that's it's a struggle. It's a
No, I think
very,
you're right.
very
And here's
much.
what I'm gonna say to that as it relates to public messaging. They always gonna push back if you drive by it because they testing to see how serious you are about it.
Absolutely.
And so I don't know of many congregations that are going to openly embrace this as soon as you arrive. I've been at Abyssinian for 15 years, y'all. And some of the people on the call right now could attest to it wasn't the blackest church in Memphis and Shelby County when I got there. And it wasn't the blackest church in Memphis and Shelby County 5 years after I was there, or 7 years after I was there, maybe even 10 years after I was there. And so part of this is the long-term strategizing. Now, I'll share a little bit. Let me share a little bit more on some of the communication strategy. Because there are ways that I think we can address some of this stuff using sermonic militancy as a framework. And again, that's reference to an essay. I'll put a link in the chat in a minute. But in essence, sermonic militancy is public proclamation that moves people to collective and communal political action. It comes through the exegesis of the soul, which is yourself, and understanding who you are, how you are, why you are. Exegesis of the society, especially as it relates to the power dynamics. And here's where a whole lot of us miss out. Because how can you get to the root cause of a system and a structure if you don't even know how the society is shaped? Most of us want to be political experts, but some of us don't even know the different branches of government. Or how, and I'm talking about pastors here, right? And it's sad because pastors think they're supposed to be at the forefront of every room that they're in. And what a lot of us need is to just sit at the feet of someone who knows and we can learn. I sat at the feet of, among other people, but this person in particular, when I was at Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, transitioning into the pastorate and, finishing up in seminary and stuff like that, one of the members there, Josh, you're going to appreciate this because he's a Sigma, Harold Collins, had just been elected to the city council. I didn't know enough about how government worked. I had to sit at the feet of Harold Collins, sitting in his office. Hey, tell me how this works. Hey, help me understand this. And he was giving me illustrations and real life examples and stuff like that. And it helped me get a better understanding. That was 2007. It was almost 20 years ago. So you have to exegete the society. And many of us don't move past the problems because we don't understand the power dynamics enough to know where the pressure point is. Nothing worse than seeing people organize a demonstration with the wrong target. I guess I could say pun intended right there. No, because I appreciated the target fast. The target boycott. Okay, that's another. So exegesis of the soul and exegesis of the society. Then you can exegete scriptures and sacred texts. But most of us think the key is to exegete the scriptures and the sacred text. But you can't exegete the society and you haven't exegeted your own soul. So all you're going to do then is not sermonic militancy. You might get a little bit of social consciousness where you, number one, name the crisis. But number two, every time we're speaking publicly as faith leaders, our aim should be to shape the theological and political consciousness. Now, I'm going to give you a strategy here. You can do that even when you don't know everything about an issue. Because what you do is center the theological and the moral issues in question form. Hey, right now, we don't know enough about thus and so. Or I know a whole lot of people who need to know a little bit more about, does the National Guard wear body cameras? Why or why not? Were they wearing them when the shooting happened? If the police, I'm talking about a recent development here, some comments I made on in an interview. So, hey, we know the National Guard typically doesn't wear body cameras, but according to the police report, they were responding to a shots fired. If they were responding, they weren't the only responders, were they? Didn't the Memphis Police Department have to respond to? Doesn't the Memphis Police Department have to wear body cameras? Is there footage out there? Can we find it? Did y'all hear me just ask 6 or 7 questions in a row? I didn't say, I know they ain't got the footage, or I know that, right? Because I don't know that. There are ways to shape the theological and political consciousness, and I don't have to have all of the answers. I just have to have deep enough theological and political reflection to center the questions outside of political opportunism. Go ahead, Reverend Elora. I want you to say what you wrote in the chat. And then Solomon, Dr. Cochran, I want you to say what you wrote in the chat too.
And my apologies for not showing my camera. As a good soror of your wife, I'm not camera ready, and this early in the morning, I'm still being mom to my daughter.
I got
But
you.
what I was sharing in the chat is I 1000% agree with you. While I think, and certainly my bishop, whose son I think is a member of your church, Bishop Marvin Frank, is very active and proactive. What I have found, we are building this bicycle and riding it at the same time. And my frustration has been that people will show up for the press conference. And I'm talking about us, religious leaders, and we'll show up for those kinds of things. But when it comes times for situations such as, or educational workshops such as this, and others that actually teach and train us, and also give us opportunities to go back and bring organizations that are who have the wherewithal to teach and train us on what it is that's going on, why, and what our next step should be. That's when you have the disengagement. They're not there. And so for me, I'm not a young adult, but I'm certainly not an old pastor as well. Trying to work with that bridge with those, and I'll just say in my church, the CME church, to understand the importance of education and what's going on, why it's going on, and what our strategy should be. One of the things we miss about the civil rights movement is that there was a lot of planning and a lot of strategy that took place. Nothing just happened by happenstance. And I think we're missing that big piece of it. So I agree, and I thank you for bringing light to that. My question, I guess, is then how do we try to engage those leaders to actually be educated?
I got you. And I'll get to that in just a second. That's beautiful. I just want to say right quick, because I've seen this far too often. People will show up for the flashpoint, right? Because they look, folks want their 15 minutes of fame. Folks want to. I've seen people who will compromise an entire move of God because we did not massage their ministerial or movement oriented ego. They wanted to be the one that the camera came to. They want. I had one preacher in Memphis tell me one time, he got the face for it, but I got the anointing for it. That's what they told me, and they told me this at a vigil for Darius Stewart, who had been shot and killed by the Memphis Police Department. Told me yeah, I got the face for it, but you got the anointing for it. So I'm telling you that kind of egotism is real. I do think there are some ways to offset some of it. Some of it you just let these niggas act a fool and keep it pushing. And I'm saying niggas is gender is racially inclusive for my dear sister Reverend Jessica of all the non-black folks on here. So that the niggas act a fool. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Cochran. I want you to say what you wrote in the comments and say a little bit more about it if you can. And then I got one more I'm gonna push through after this.
All right, just real quick. Nothing complex. Just the ideal of, I know someone's spoken about churches, church leaders, religious leaders speaking and questioning, why do we always have to push to Black or African, Africana or whatever. That comes from, and we have to understand that everything defaults to whiteness. So even when someone's telling you a story, anytime someone's telling a story and they say the man was going shopping, the implication and the assumption is always that that man is white. Right. You have to state if you're trying to bring appearance, you have to state the Blackness or or to the thing, to the person, to identify that it is not. This society, the Western culture, is automatically, in everything that it encompasses, is default to white male, unless you intentionally state something other than that.
Which is why it's important to exegete your soul, because that's when you're going to find out, for most of us, your God is white too. That's your starting point.
Right.
That's your starting point. And then you have to exercise that white God out of you. That's why William Jones wrote the book, Is God a White Racist? As he's critiquing Black theologians. And if you've seen more recently what one of the more notable Black theologians did out of Chicago, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Let me press on. So you definitely want to shape the theological and political consciousness with your public messaging. And you want to strategize in a way that is responding to the root causes. So, King said, if I give $1 to a homeless person, y'all call me a saint. If I ask you why there are homeless people in the richest country in the world, y'all gonna call me a communist. Isn't it funny that the term communist is coming back up now? And so, look, Jesus could just heal folks, and he did do some healing, but he also said, go show yourself to the priest. He get into some root cause stuff. He said to the man at the pool of Bethesda, take up your mat and walk. Why not leave the mat there? Well, according to some scholarship, the mat would have been something given to him by the government, so the government could say how benevolent they have been. And so now he gets to take the mat up and say, hey, first of all, this is a little pissy mat. Okay, SNAP benefits. It ain't enough. And I need y'all to know this ain't what helped me. Jesus is what helped, but that's another thing. But you strategize to get to the root of the issue. And then you have to execute the strategy with communal civic engagement. It's too many Lone Rangers, y'all. Too many folks trying to do this. And I'm coming back to even something that Reverend Earle was saying, and that is the celebrity consciousness is killing us, because that's ultimately what people want. They want the fame, they want the notoriety, and that makes them operate in a Lone Ranger mentality, because it takes time to build communal engagement. And so I'll just share a few of the things that we've done more recently, and these are ways to do some communal engagement. So we're responding to the redistricting being passed in Memphis, and I started crunching some numbers for Black faith communities. The first one I crunched was how many people sat out in the last presidential election. Mm-hmm. So in Tennessee, 1.7 million people sat out of the election. If you are in Tennessee, you know somebody, right? And then I said, how many sat out in Shelby County? 250,000 people in Shelby County. 300,000 people in Davidson County, where Nashville is. 40,000 people in Madison County. And so I'm sharing this with faith communities to say, you know, if it's 250,000 people in Shelby County who sat out, you know, a lot of them are Black folks, which means a lot of them are in your network. A lot of them go to your church. So, you know, we start there. Then we do a Black Civics 101 class because we know people need to learn some of the basics of civics, because you want to do all of this public advocacy, but too often our people end up being loud and wrong. So none of this is done in isolation. All of this is done communally. And then you ask people and their congregation to adopt a precinct. So I'm going through, when churches send me their address, I'm asking them, what is the closest precinct to your church? I'm going and pulling the voter file for that precinct and sending it to the pastor. So now the pastor knows the contact information of everybody who was registered to vote at the precinct closest to his church or her church, their church, in 2024. Guess what you could do? From there, you can canvass that list. You can call folks, phone banking. You can text folks. You can email folks. And you can tell them about the issue. This particular issue, what is it? Voting. So now Abyssinian gets to go to the precinct closest to Abyssinian, Whitehaven Community Center, Solomon Temple, St. Paul Baptist Church, right? Not those exact locations, but I pulled the information for all of the voters in those precincts. And now we get to tell people, hey, here's what the numbers look like. Here's the issues. We're reaching out on behalf of Abyssinian. And by the way, we're going to all go vote together on the last day of early voting. We'll be at Abundant Grace Fellowship Church. If you need any information, now I'm doing a bunch of things here, but one of the main things I'm doing is building relationships. Hey, I know them folks, they came or they called or they sent a text. I got a text message from the, and then I'm saying like, hey, oh, by the way, the day after, the last day of early voting, family and friends day at Abyssinian, you can come. What do you think I'm going to talk about if they come to the church that Sunday? The issue. That's when my attempt at prophetic preaching can hopefully inspire some communal action. I'm going to say, I'm preaching this, trying to get us to do this thing. So, Dr. Matlock, tell me what you tell me about the link you put in the chat. And so we got 19 minutes. We'll just take Q&A. Y'all shoot off your questions or your comments. Keep in mind, let's try to get as many people in as we can. So I know preachers can be long-winded. So try to keep your question, your comment, or your response under 2 minutes.
I put a link for an ebook that I created. This is a Civics Review, Black History Edition, for those who have considered politics and the rest of us. And it goes through just all of the parts of government. It goes over different legislation and how certain bills came to be. So it's looking at African-American veterans, housing, the GI Bill, generational wealth, and how all of that is connected to politics and understanding voting, Black women's labor, Reconstruction, the struggle for dignity. But it's connecting lived experience in life with the political process, so individuals can have a connection and build a relationship with what's happening, so they can see themselves and see others and why their vote is important. And so it's about 100 pages, 110 pages, but it goes through all the amendments, the Constitution, and then how all those things came to be. Project 2025, that blueprint is talked about in there. So it's just something I put together actually earlier in the year, when we started thinking about just civics and what else we can do, what action steps we can do. And this was one of my action steps, was pulling that together. So it's on my website. And then I was trying to put the link, the actual e-file in the chat, but the file's too big. Okay. The file's too big, yeah.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you for sharing and adding that content. I just put a link to our Black Civics 101 session that we did with Up to Vote 901. And then I'm putting a link to the Sermonic Militancy essay in the chat. Y'all can download if y'all want to. And that's more theoretical Definitely, they should start talking about hermeneutics and some of the ways to get some of the kind of public proclamations that I think we want. Sister Kathy, you want to say your question or you want me to read it?
Okay, the last time I dealt with someone, they were talking about the election. It's not the Democrats or Republicans that's going to be the issue. It's going to be the independents and conservatives. And Rich, what's her name? Michelle, the Congresswoman, spoke on the floor of one of the meetings, and she was saying, yes, they are increasing in numbers. How do we reach out to them? Because they're not being swayed one way or the other, but they're going to be most of one leading.
Yeah, one, don't believe the hype. One of the numbers that started to stick that I researched, and it didn't even take me long to research this, and it's wild. Like y'all, if y'all really want to start doing some of this stuff, if you really put some time in, you can get some information. And I found what I'm about to share with y'all in a quick Google search in 30 minutes after I realized redistricting maps had been passed. I wanted to figure out where there could be some traction with inactive voters. And I was under the impression that Tennessee was a ruby red state. And I Googled how many independent voters in Tennessee. First thing popped up is the Independent Voter Project. And the link said Tennessee is 33% Republican, 18% Democrat, 48% independent. And I just started sharing that number some everywhere. And folks just didn't know it, right? And so the idea that people are thinking, A, you got to be pandering to a political party is a myth. You don't. Stay on the issue. Whatever the issue is, then just ask the person, now find me the candidate that you think is most closely in line with how you feel on the issue. And some of that stuff speaks for itself. I don't endorse candidates. And look, I'm getting calls every day from somebody, who putting their endorsement list together. And I'm saying, from a public messaging standpoint, that stuff don't matter. It is heavy risk, low reward. Because the assumption that somebody is going to vote for a candidate simply because you attached your name to that candidate is misleading, number one, because if it was true, our voter turnout would not be as low as it is, because you got people endorsing people all over the place, all of the time, out the wazoo, and you still had 250,000 people who sat out of a presidential election in 2024. Please. And look, local elections, you getting 18, 25, no more than 30% turnout, and everybody endorsing people. Secondly, if they do just so happen to vote for somebody because you said you support that person, if that person get in office and act a fool, that the person that voted for them because of you is not going to come to you and say, hey, bruh, hey, sis, hey, doc, hey, rev, hey, pastor, our candidate is acting a fool. They're going to say, your boy, your girl is acting a fool. So it's just not wise long term. And what it attempts to do is cut across the canvas of the relationship building that needs to happen. And it presents us as the celebrities that people need to follow. And do what I do. I like green. Don't you like green? I like yellow. Don't you like yellow? So all of that to say, when you focus on the issue, the politician that most closely aligns with the issue speaks for themselves. And I'm saying there's enough out there where you don't have to say this is reaching out to conservatives. No. And somebody doing that, they showing their hand, but that's another thing. Thank you, Brother Jimmy. Appreciate it. Okay, got it.
Doc, let me jump in there right quick. I might have to run in a minute, but certainly, man, thank you so much for your scholarship, more so for your service and your sacrifice to not just Memphis, man, but throughout this country. We appreciate you to the utmost. You mentioned the exegesis of one's own soul. And that was something that really hit me hard a few years ago. You being my teacher and our leader, can you take a deeper dive into the exegesis of one's own soul, particularly when it comes to the theological framework that we have internally? Because I think sometimes when we get that piece right, when we get the language together within our own lives about who our Lord is, then it's a little bit easier to preach, teach, and proclaim to others who Jesus is. That there was a politic of Jesus. Jesus had politic in reference to first century Palestine and what was going on regarding that particular day and age. So could you elaborate and extrapolate a little bit more on that exegesis of one's own soul, so that there may be those online who need to have a little bit better sense and taste of that, so we can move forward reframing our theology.
Yep. Thank you, Doc. The first thing I have many of my students in religious studies courses in undergrad do is what I call a religious autobiography. Simply, how did you come to know what you think you know about God? Right. And it usually starts, I grew up in church, or my grandmama, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then we just start to kind of like dissect that and interrogate some of that. And as you mature in it and evolve in it, then the questions get deeper and more reflective. And it is about you ultimately trying to figure out honestly where truth lies with you. And you might even mature to the point to where you just get you a therapist. Hello, somebody. I can't see nobody. Have I got any help in here? Right? Because fundamentally, those toxins that the psalmist says, I was born in sin and shaped in iniquity. And we think that means there was something wrong with his black mama's bloodstream. I think the psalmist is describing a social and political environment that is so toxic that when you're born, you're breathing it in the air you breathe. It's full of sin and inequity. So if that is our foundation, how else do we become honest about how we see God and understand God without interrogating that? So you got to exegete that stuff. You got to be honest about that. And when you don't, then that's when you end up projecting your trauma and your toxicity theologically on people, and then you call it, what do they say? I'm just telling the truth and shaming the devil, or it's tight but it's right, that sort of stuff. So those are some of the ways, just in like short order. Start with just kind of like describing your religious autobiography. I tell you, I'm a denominational cosmopolitan, right? So I grew up in the Baptist church, Hopewell Missionary Baptist Church. That's where I got my soul. And then we transitioned to Faith Evangelistic Church of God in Christ, where Elder W.C. Askew Senior Superintendent was my pastor, and that's where I got my little shout from. And then I got some sophistication when I came to Memphis and toggled between Metropolitan Baptist Church on the campus of Lemoyne and Mississippi Boulevard Christian Church, where the first time I encountered like mega church and high professionalism in ministry and all this other stuff, right? So all of those things help shape and make me who I am. That's part of my religious autobiography. And all of those different sectors come with glows and grows, highs and lows, goods and bads. I remember walking in the Mississippi Boulevard like, God, what is going on? Hey, God is like, I'm telling you what to do and what not to do. And so you have to wrestle with those things. Like, how do you believe what you believe about God? And for those of us who've been to seminary, that's seminary at its best, helping you wrestle through those things before you just start trying to wrestle through and exegete scriptures and texts and stuff. That's where most of us start. Most of us start thinking you're supposed to exegete the scripture first. No, exegete your soul first. And some of us just need a therapist. Ashe. Josh Lonzo says, how does allowing politicians to speak from the church pulpit influence the relationship? I think it could, and mostly does, not always, but most often it probably compromises the integrity of the pulpit platform. Now, I know it can be done in some ways and in some contexts in a kind of reasonable and responsible way. But I'm saying on Sunday morning during church service, I think that is exploitation. People don't preach. Politicians don't speak at Abyssinian on Sunday. Now, if you come to a town hall meeting, go ahead, go for it. They had a political forum at New Sardis a couple weeks ago. Debate. It was wonderful. District 9. I was talking to a local reporter who was asking me some questions about some of the candidates in the race yesterday. I think it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. But within the context of the sacred moment of worship, which is what I think you're describing, Josh, I'm saying it could be rather compromising and exploitative. But I don't pastor everybody's churches. I just pastor Abyssinian. And so, there might be other pastors and preachers who think differently and want to have a different kind of perspective on that. But that's for me. And I'll say this though. Too many of us think the end game of pastoring is proximity to political power. So I'll say this. Somebody told me one time, because I was talking about people who met with the previous mayor, and I knew that the mayor at the time was intentionally trying to, let's just say, avoid me. And if I'm being hyperbolic, then somebody could try to check that, but I don't think I am. And so I said publicly, I don't condemn or criticize any of the preachers who went there, because I knew that that was the political strategy of the executive in the office. And so I just tried to focus on the structural and the systemic instead of the cosmetic. The cosmetic is who is in the room. The structural and the systemic is what is the end game? What is he trying to do? What is he trying to accomplish? What kind of policies are going to come out of it? And so one of the preachers said, sent word, so-and-so, tell Fisher, I said, he ain't the only prophet in town. And I said, number one, I never said I was a prophet, let alone the only prophet in town. But let's also be clear. You ain't a prophet just because you're in the room with the king. And you ain't a prophet just because you tell the king a pretty story. You are only a prophet if you're willing to tell the king, thou art the man. And so I think a lot of times people want that proximity so bad that they play both sides against the middle, get all of the candidates close as they can. So whoever's in power. And I've had some of them tell me, like, so-and-so returned my call. I don't give a damn if so-and-so returned my call or not. How are they functioning in the office? I don't need another friend. I got enough friends. And even the people who I'm cool with, even the people who do return my call, I don't care. And if they're wrong in the office. So you judge how people act in the office. Our public messaging cannot be about our personal relationships with the people in office. That's what has diminished the value of the voice of the pulpit to begin with. They think all we want, and many people do, is to make friends with the people who are in office and then get invited to the prayer breakfast. Or get access to the $25,000 grant. You can't even replace the pipes in the, okay, never mind. We got 4 minutes, y'all. Who should hold elected officials accountable? Short answer, everybody. Because everybody is impacted by the people who are in office. Everybody, it is everybody's responsibility. Too many of us abdicate that responsibility. We think it's the preacher's responsibility, or we think it's the activist, or it's everybody's responsibility to hold people accountable. The ultimate measure of accountability for anybody in public office is to vote them out when they don't do a good job. That's why you got to be careful who you let in. Case in point, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. 3 minutes. I actually read that wrong, Josh. Thanks for the prompt. I thought you said who, Josh Lonzo. Who? I thought you said who should hold elected officials. You said we should hold elected. Yeah, absolutely. Especially the faith leaders, man. It's sad to see. I've been in a meeting where some of the more notable faith leaders, I literally heard them say out of their mouths, Mr. Mayor, whatever you need us to do. And I said, no, it's not whatever he need us to do. We don't serve at the pleasure of the mayor. And it'd be crazy because those same elected officials that those other faith leaders pander to with their public messaging reach out to me for perspective because they know I'm gonna shoot it to them straight. All right. So if I was to review this real quick, I would just say what I've been trying to articulate is that we need to move from this notion of making just public statements to implementing some public strategy. And I believe sermonic militancy is a model for this type of public discipleship because this moment that we are facing, where there are attacks on voting rights and public education and historical memory, have to be met with more than just some symbolic and surface level speech or public proclamation. We got denominations and folks gathering all over the country who are issuing statements, rightfully so, but we need to be committed to strategy. So the Black church has to move from reactive commentary to proactive organization. And there are several ways to do that. I've just tried to lay out some of the ways to do that strategically. So again, thank y'all for spending some time up in here with me. And hopefully the rest of this time that we spend together today will be fruitful. So let's jump out. Peace, y'all.
Thank you,